Ole, 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 ole. Ole, ole. Ole, 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 ole. Ole. Welcome to Homegrown, a soccer Yanks home for domestic soccer. This is Jason Sieira, co-host and executive producer of Homegrown. It's our summer soccer review and college soccer preview show. We have interviews with Alecko Eskandarian, head coach of the NPSL Champion's New York Cosmo B team, and Laura Kane, captain of the 2015 Colorado Prides, the runner-ups to the W League. Before we get into the interview with Alecko, quick rundown of the National Premier League soccer season. The NPSL, also with the PDL, went through several changes. The U23 MLS affiliated clubs have basically all moved to PDL, while the NASL reserve teams moved to the NPSL. The NPSL basically kept their semi-pro status, as you hear in an interview with the head coach of the Cosmos B team, which is made up primarily of reserve players for the first team and former pros from MLS, the Spanish Segunda, and the Championship in England. The more interesting and passionate sides of the lower divisions, such as Detroit FC, Nashville FC, and Chattanooga, all remained in the NPSL. The final was between Chattanooga, who has made the finals 4 times in the last 6 seasons, and the Cosmos B team, was held at Finley Stadium in Chattanooga in front of more than 18,000 fans, which nearly doubled the previous NPSL attendance record. The Cosmos B team won the championship 3-2 in extra time on the strength of Ibrahim Baya brace. Now, go to our interview with the championship coach of Cosmos B, Alecko Eskandarian. With the head coach of the NPSL Championship Cosmos B team, assistant coach for the Cosmos. You had, as a college career, you had a phenomenal college career, a great high school career. Alecko Eskandarian, phenomenal follow on Twitter. Thank you for coming on.
Anytime. It's my pleasure.
So this is a new team, the Cosmos B team. Just give me a sense of what the purpose of starting this new team was, and how it kind of fits in your whole club.
Yeah, we had talked about it for a while. Obviously, as our club continues to grow, which we're a very new team, a new professional team, this was the next step in our growth. We had spoken about it the last couple of years about having a reserve team or an under-23 team or just any type of resource where guys, younger players that we had signed could get some playing time and can also grow. Because if you just have the first team, it's difficult to really manage the minutes, and you're going to have a lot of players who have a lot of potential, but if they're not getting any time, they're going to go to be a bit rusty. So we had talked about how having a B team would have been a huge benefit for us, and fortunately the club front office backed it, and next thing you know, a few months later, we created a Cosmos B team out of nothing.
When you came into MLS, you were number 1 overall pick, if I'm not mistaken, 2003?
Correct.
You were. I know you were Soccer America Player of the Year. You just had the accolades to kind of get you to that next step. And I know this is a new team, and you don't have the infrastructure yet. But in a sense of NPSL and even the PDL, do you see as your youth development team comes up that you can get these college kids, you can get these kids who go through your league, through your youth development side, and kind of look forward to training them, and especially you personally, who, if you're going to be continuing as coach, training those new guys and new young players into the Cosmo way?
Absolutely. That's the most rewarding part. If you are able to get some of the most talented young players into your system, have them work in a professional environment, everyone's a winner in that scenario, because now these young players are developing. They're seeing what it's like to be in a professional environment. They, with our system, at times they're going to have the opportunity to train next to the guys with the pedigree of Raul and Marco Senna, and that all just helps their development. It helps them to gain that experience of also playing in games and practicing next to those guys. And obviously, from my standpoint, it's very rewarding to coach guys like that I feel have a big future, and helping them learn and hopefully avoid any mistakes that maybe I made or other young professionals make, and just to hopefully steer them on a path to give them the best amount of success as possible.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the season. You were undefeated. You had one draw on the entire season. You had, is it true you guys had Steve Nash coming in and train a little bit with you guys? I know, I mean, a huge basketball fan. I know he has at least a physical ability. I mean, I'm not sure of his playing skills, but the guy's a workhorse machine. He can at least kind of play on the field with you guys a little bit. Just describe the overall experience of this season, your first year coaching, and how it was.
It was awesome. I literally could not have asked for a better group of players or a better staff. It was a great year, especially when you look back at where we started. We had tryouts on the March afternoon where it snowed, and we had about 300 kids that showed up, and I think about 9 or 10 of those kids from those tryouts were actually on our roster to play. And to go back and look at that, where it was 300 kids who didn't know anything about each other, trying to narrow it down and grow from there, it's pretty cool. It was a pretty cool experience to narrow it down, build a team, and then obviously we had some international guys that joined us a month later, and to try to get this group to buy into our system and to work together and get to know each other. It was really, really cool how it all worked out. And the team, the best thing about our Cosmos V team was that it grew. With every game that we played, we got better. So that for me was very important, to kind of start with the basics and then to challenge them week by week and give them something new to work on, something new to see if they could get better at. And every week they improved, which was very important for us.
Now, how was it for you coaching? I mean, is this just another great experience for you, another notch in your belt? Do you have aspirations? Do you feel like you got the bug now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it. I wasn't sure after my playing career if I wanted to even get into coaching, and I kind of fell into it. Peter Novak of the Philadelphia Union was the first guy that really reached out to me and said, "Hey, I think you have the qualities of a great coach, and I want to bring you on board my staff." So he was the guy that really spurred it on. But I grew up in a soccer family, so with how I grew up with my parents and my brother, every day was a coaching session. Of just discussing the game and tactics and watching soccer. So it's very much a part of life for me. It comes very natural, and yeah, I've enjoyed it. There's definitely pros and cons to it, like any other job. For me, I felt like it was the right thing to do. It just feels right to pass along all my experiences and all the lessons that I've learned through soccer, and I feel it's the right thing to do is for me to pass along to the younger generation.
If anybody doesn't know, your father actually played for the Cosmos for several seasons. Were you I guess you were with them. Did you hang on the practice field? Did you see a lot of stuff when you were there? Did you pick up any little tidbits? Kind of like I guess the best analogy for Americans who aren't familiar with it, you were almost like Randy Moss essentially when his father was always on the field, always covering games on the practice field.
Absolutely. I grew up with the Cosmos. That was a part of my family. My earliest memories as a child are juggling a ball with Carlos Alberto in the locker room and thinking these are my buddies that just play soccer with me. And I remember I used to get annoyed when the coach would walk in and be like, "All right, it's time to play the game." I'd be like, "Man, you're interrupting my juggling game that I got going on." But yeah, I grew up in the locker rooms. I grew up on the fields, and it wasn't until I was maybe 10, 11 years old that I realized, who the people were that I was actually playing with, and how lucky and blessed I was to be able to be surrounded by world-class soccer players and learn from them. So I very much grew, part of that golden generation, I guess, that the Cosmos introduced, where they basically introduced soccer to the country, and to be part of that is pretty special. Talk
a little bit about the quality of the league. I know right now NASL is having a lot of reserve teams in the NPSL. What do you see on these teams that you're playing? And then also, if you can, talk a little bit about at the end of the atmosphere of having that last game, the championship game at Chattanooga.
Sure. I mean, this was my first experience with NPSL, so I really wasn't sure what to expect from the opposition, from the fans, or anything like that. And it really varies, to be honest with you. I mean, I'll always be very honest with all my answers, but there were definitely some games where, the fields were a little bit of a disaster and there weren't many people and things like that. And then there were games that were very, first class, especially the final game, but some of the teams in our league definitely have a nice setup, whether it be their facilities, the fans, the support. And it's all about growing the game. It's part of the growing pains to know that there's going to be some places that are still working on improving. And, I'm very much a believer, especially for young players, that they should go through that. They should have to struggle and not be pampered. All that stuff is important for mental toughness. So I actually enjoyed it when teams had a bad setup and we had to go through some adversity, because I just think that's good for young players to go through. But overall, I was very pleased with the level of play. There were some very talented players, and it was pretty cool to see the different setup of each team. Some teams had mainly college players, some guys had seasoned pros, so there was a huge mix in terms of talent level and experience, and that made it fun.
Now, the show or this interview is going to be in part of a college soccer preview podcast. So I would be very remiss if I didn't ask you. You play at Hofstra Field with the team. Do you guys catch any of the Hofstra team's games? Do you watch any film of guys coming in? Do you kind of practice with those guys? I know Syracuse is a phenomenal school soccer-wise. They're playing their first game in Hofstra this season. Do you guys get a chance to go out and scout?
No, I know Richie Nettle very well, the Hofstra coach, but I never saw the Hofstra team. We obviously worked on different schedules, so didn't mix with those guys at all. But I'm a UVA guy, so the only college soccer team I follow is University of Virginia.
You guys obviously won it last year. Do you attend any of the games or fly out for alumni games?
Yeah, I try to make it down to Charlottesville at least once or twice a year. And I was actually just looking at their schedule to see when I'll be able to make it down again this year. But yeah, that's obviously my alma mater, and that's actually my first coaching start was going back to school to finish up my degree. I became the voluntary assistant coach there, so that kind of has a dear place in my heart, and I'll always stay in touch with that program. So it's pretty fun to follow, and obviously as the assistant coach with the Cosmos, I'm always watching the college game to scout different players from different programs.
Last question: you were a great college player. You're a very highly recruited high school player, obviously going to Virginia. Do you think that there's still a spot for college players in this game? I know right now in MLS you talk about homegrowns and being attached to leagues and being attached to teams. Do you think that there's legitimacy or a legitimate spot for high developed players who go to college and going into pro?
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the national team, you look at the pros, and there's a lot of players that weren't highly recruited or highly thought of until they went to college and they developed and then made a name for themselves. So there's a lot of guys that can really benefit from college. I do think our country's heading in the right direction in terms of getting the best players at a young age to enter professional environments, but there's a lot of college soccer programs that have professional environments. I know at UVA, all the guys are treated very professionally there. There's great facilities, great coaches. So, I think it depends on the programs, but there's definitely a place for college soccer because some guys are late bloomers, some guys just aren't identified. It's a big country that we live in, and it's really tough to get all these best players to identify them properly. And so there are some guys that slip through the cracks, and we've seen throughout the years how many guys have come in who are kind of not without much fanfare, and no one really knew about them, and all of a sudden they blow up the college scene and become future national team players. So Clint Dempsey is a great example of that. He went to Furman. I remember he was a year younger than me, and no one had ever really heard of him. And all of a sudden, within a year or two, he became Rookie of the Year in MLS, and then went on to this great career. So there's definitely a place for the college game.
Great. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for coming on.
Anytime.
NPSL has pushed PDL as the premier amateur league connecting MLS U20 and the college game. Being on a PDL side, not necessarily playing, but at least training, is a requirement for most preseason conference, national team, and Heisman Trophy lists. For the U23 MLS sides, results are secondary as it's to teach a style, develop players, and gain more information in scouting. Despite this, the Sounders U23 and the Rebels U23 reached the PDL National Finals. In the National Final playoffs, KW United FC, a Canadian team, defeated MLS youth teams at Starfire Stadium on the way to the championship. First beating the Seattle Sounders 1-0. In the final, KW United defeated last season's NPSL Champion Red Bull U23 side 4-3. Despite losing Ben Polk in the 13th minute to an ankle injury, Ben Polk was the team's leading goal scorer and leading goal scorer among all junior college players last year. It was recently announced that PDL MVP Anthony Grant from Jamaica of the Seacoast United and Bowling Green University just signed with the Richmond Kickers of the USL. Now let's go to our interview with Laura Kane as we discuss women's second tier. She gives us her opinion as a former player and college coach on the progress of the developmental league in women's soccer and a couple of names to watch out for in the future. I'm with Laura Kane, Competitive Director of Youth Development with Colorado Pride and Director and Owner of Soccer Shots. How are you, Laura?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I really appreciate you coming on and talk a little bit about the W League and your time with the Colorado Pride. So explain a little bit to me about the W League and the summer soccer in general.
Sure. The W League is a women's pro-am league, which means that it's semi-pro. They are allowed to pay players to play. However, I would say the majority of the league is actually made up of current college kids, so it's mostly amateur. It's a great environment for girls to play over the summer in a professional environment, and especially for those who aspire to play in the pro league. I think it's a great stepping stone for that and a great opportunity in women's soccer.
Now, you play professionally overseas. You play professionally, I believe. Did you play professionally domestically early in your career?
I did not. So the women's league didn't exist when I got out of college. So I took a break from playing and actually got into college coaching at Purdue University. So I was there for 2 seasons before I decided to play again. I kind of got that itch, and so I went over to Sweden and played professionally in the first division there for a team called PTOEF.
All right. So you play professionally. You've coached college. Tell me a little bit about competitively about the W League. It's considered second tier of women's soccer. It's an organization that's part of USL, which is the third organization in the third tier of men's soccer. So just kind of talk a little bit about what you see out of the college players you play with, some of the professional players. I know you had a few professional players on your team. Just talk a little bit about what the level of soccer they see.
Yeah, I mean, even though it's considered the second tier to the women's league, I really don't think that you can judge the quality based on that, because we had the MVP of the league, Tara Andrews from Australia. She's a professional player in Australia, and then she comes to play for Pride over the summer. And so, she was obviously quality enough to become the MVP of the league. And so just because she's not playing in the pro league here doesn't mean that she's not good enough, honestly. I think there's some clubs that are probably taking a look at her now after this season and the success that she's had. But we have a lot of the top college players in the league, mostly because they want to maintain their amateur status while they're still in college. I think from the national championship team last year in LA, there was 5 players who ended up playing in the Pro League this year and getting drafted. So just because they're maintaining their amateur status and they're still young doesn't mean that they're not going to play in the Pro League eventually. So I'd say the quality is as high as I've seen in my career, and I really enjoyed being a part of it this summer.
Yeah, it's having only 9 professional women's teams, and I guess essentially the pay not being great. A lot of women's players who maybe as juniors or seniors could probably play professionally might be some of the better players on NWSL teams are probably still playing college soccer. So I imagine that competition-wise, it's really high. In both leagues, both second-tier leagues, it was the Washington Spirits reserve team and the Chicago Red Stars in the NWPL League who won their championships, which is both reserve teams. Your team's independent league. When someone comes out to watch some games, get a sense of what might be the difference between, say, a reserve team or an independent team like the Colorado Pride.
Yeah, I think on the women's side, there really isn't much of a difference in terms of the environment that we were able to create here. Colorado Pride is a huge club in Colorado Springs, and so, we have the support and the fan base of, an entire youth club behind us. I know Rush is in that same situation up in Denver. And there's a lot of other women's teams who have the backing of an entire youth club behind them. So just because we don't have the women's pro team in front of us doesn't mean that the quality that we're able to create is not the same. And so we were able to bring players from all over the country. It's not like we only considered local players for our team. And internationally, we had 2 Germans and 3 Australians play for us this summer. And so we set them up with host families within the club. And so the environment that we're able to create, and also our coach, Sean Hudson, did a great job on the training side of things, just creating a professional environment and a competitive training schedule for us. And so I really don't think there's much of a difference that you would see. And obviously we played Spirit Reserves in the final, so the fact that we were able to get there without having been a reserve team for one of the pro teams, obviously means that the quality was there.
Tell me a little bit about the players that you played with and then played against. Some of the standout players, if they're college players, also if they're professional players that we might not see, obviously, this year in NWSL, but maybe next year. Who can we look forward to seeing?
Yeah, I mean, on our team this year, I would say the 2 players that stood out. One was the goalkeeper of the year, Britt Eckerstrom from Penn State. She's definitely a player that I would imagine would get drafted next year once she graduates. The other one from our team is Tara Andrews, who I already mentioned, from Australia. And, she was fairly quiet last year. She came on at the end of games, and she did score some goals last year, but she's a young player, and her confidence just grew, and this year she just blossomed as a player. So I'd imagine next year, if she's going to be returning to the States, that some of the NWSL teams would be giving her a look. And then from teams that we played against, I would say the 2 players that stood out most to me were Rose Laval from Seattle Sounders. She was just phenomenal on the dribble. I play in the midfield, and so I had to play alongside of her or against her. And she's definitely a great young talent. She plays for Wisconsin. And then Andy Sullivan is the other player that really stood out to me. She plays for the Spirit Reserves. She's a kid from Stanford, center back. And she was just phenomenal. So, yeah, we've got some of the greatest talent in the country and even abroad.
So as your new role in the competitive director of youth development, the Pride, what would you be doing? Is the Pride dealing with youth, with young boys, young girls? Is it just girls? Tell me a little bit about your time, what your time there is going to be like.
Sure. So I've only been on the job for about a week, but I've been coaching 2 teams every season since I came to Colorado. So I've got a U14 and a U18 girls team, but the club itself serves 4 to 18-year-olds, both boys and girls. And we're extremely competitive. Even on the girls' side, we're not an ECNL club, but we, compete with some of the top clubs in the country. And so in my role, I'll be serving, really all the children through 4 through 18. And for me, I'm really passionate about coaching education. And so I think it's important that we're making sure that we're instilling confidence in young girls and making sure that we're having a positive impact on kids. And so, I really want to focus on that area of coaching education while I'm on staff here at Pride.
And talk a little bit about soccer shots. The thing that really intrigued me was you start at 2 years old.
Yeah, so Soccer Shots, I've been involved with the company for about 8 years now, and I've only been a franchise owner here in Colorado Springs for about a year and a half, and we serve 2 to 8-year-old kids. We run the program. We don't have our own facilities, so we run it on site at preschools, daycares, elementary schools, and so it's really a great opportunity for kids who haven't been involved in the sport before to try it out. It's an intro to soccer program, but I think the greatest thing about the program is that we include character lessons in all of our classes. So even though they're learning the basics of the game of soccer, they're also learning about respect and honesty and teamwork. And so I think that is really what it comes down to if you're going to involve your child in sports, is that they're going to take something away from it that's greater than the game itself. And so I think Soccer Shots does a great job of including that in their curriculum.
All right, great. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Now let's wrap up with a quick preview of the college game. Women's college soccer season started this past weekend, with the reigning national champions, Florida State, atop the preseason polls. Last year's runner-up Virginia was number 2, and Stanford's number 3. Both of the standouts that Laura mentioned are on the Herman Trophy's preseason watch list. Roosevelt, midfielder for Wisconsin, scored in Wisconsin's opener this weekend. She is number 2 on Top Drawer Soccer's top 100 list. And Andy Sullivan, center back from Stanford, is currently number 10 on the Top Drawer top 100 list. Number 1 on Top Drawer Soccer's 100 Best Women's list should be no surprise. It's Kadisha Buchanan of West Virginia, the Canadian fullback in the most recent World Cup. Those interested in following the women's game will have plenty of opportunities, as ESPN3 airs a few dozen games every week. Plus, you have multiple games on the Big Ten Network and the Pac-10. If you're hoping to follow the men's game, it's a little more difficult. It's not as easily accessible without having to pay for it. The Big Ten usually shows one game a week, as it's Pac-10. ESPN, who has a contract with SEC, typically shows Kentucky and South Carolina. However, they're not part of the SEC because there's no SEC men's conference soccer. There should be a little more interest in the men's college soccer season just because of Jordan Morris and his ability to come into the national team and produce at a high level. There's probably not going to be across-the-board interest in men's soccer. If there's going to be no team connected with Stanford or the forward, you're not going to see random people coming to a local soccer game expecting to see something. But hopefully we'll see some curiosity, at least in the news coverage and in the in live streams, and maybe a few bumps in television coverage for the Big Ten Network and Pac-10. I know the Pac-10 is showing Stanford in the first month of the coverage. I'm sure more people want to probably get a couple more games of Stanford as the year goes on, not just for Morris, but as the rest of the players are actually quite a good team. While Jordan Morris is viewed as a top American, 2 Ghanaians, Abu Danlanda, forward from UCLA, and Georgetown center back Joshua Yarborough, might turn out to be the best 2 prospects. With Morris likely to miss a lot of matches for calls-up, it's likely the Ghanaians will be battling for the Herman Trophy this season. U.S. Soccer also had a college ID camp this August in anticipation for the Olympics. These are not necessarily the top college players, but rather an opportunity to evaluate some players in person. 2 Herman Trophy watchlist members got an invite. Adam Najah, midfielder from Akron, and Brandon Vincent. It's unclear how many players, aside from Jordan Morris, actually make the roster, but at least they get an opportunity to get looked at, maybe get some evaluation, get told what they're missing from the game, what they can add to the game. In regards to the top 25, UCLA was number 1. Despite the fact that national champions Virginia received more than double the first place votes. Georgetown, who seems to have a pipeline straight to the Red Bull Academy, brought in 2 more freshmen. They're at number 3 in this year's preseason national polls. Hopefully this year we're going to try to cut out a small segment of each episode for college soccer, maybe men's or women's or both. We'll see how that works out. I'm hoping for it. Covering college soccer for NJ College Soccer Weekly allows me to get really into the college game, see kind of stuff that's going on, see the high prospects. So I would love to cover more college soccer on Homegrown, so we can fit that into our coverage. So I hope you enjoyed it, and if you're interested, you can come visit my site, njcollegesoccer.com. Come visit Soccer Yanks. We're going to keep pumping out the Homegrowns. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to email us, njcollegesoccer@gmail.com. And also you can find us at Homegrown. Just tweet at Homegrown page any questions or comments about upcoming shows. Thanks for listening.